Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think about the China PCB market development in the coming years? Any challenge?
I think there's a lot of challenges. I think one thing is that the PCBs, well, it's a very low margin industry. There's a lot of industries that have higher margins than the PCB. So it's very little that the PCB manufacturers can do in terms of reducing their costs or actually reducing their, increasing their productivity. Because everyone knows that you've got the 10, 11, 12 different steps in the manufacturing process, and it's IP that really is standard in industry and routine. It's not that specific where you differentiate yourself from other manufacturers. So some of the firms that we did talk to in this expo have talked about value adding in terms of other dimensions in providing other services to go with their PCB, and actually providing services in the area of management, to actually improving their skills of the customer employees in their production, in addition to supplying products. So the big challenge is actually moving beyond their own product and providing a surround service of value added to their customers. But it is really, really tough, this industry, because on average the gross profit margin 3, 4, 5% maximum. We were at Expo last week and the touchscreen displays profit margin is 10%. And as we all know in China, what happens is when new technology comes along, a lot of companies just jump in straight away and then drive down those margins. The PCB has been around for a long time, so it really doesn't enjoy those high margins these days.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you think any impact of the Japan earthquake in March this year and the euro prices and the US prices the few months ago?
It's very interesting when you talk about external, outside of China, major events, political, economic, as well as natural disasters. But what happened in Japan, really, really sad. It was something that caused a shock in the supply chain. But I think a lot of the, within about 2 months after that, a lot of firms recovered from that and were able to get their supply chains back in order in many cases. Or they had alternative suppliers that they could go to. So that affected, say, 1/4 of production. But I think now, talking to CEOs of major distributors in US and Europe, what they were saying, even up to about 4 or 5 months ago, was saying that the consumer is weakening. And this was even before the recent euro crisis, that there was the consumer demand was cutting back. And I think in electronics industry, like for the last decade, things have been growing every year, and we've enjoyed that growth and right throughout the value chain. And we talk about now the consumer, it's not just the last month, we see the crisis now, especially in the headlines, and the currency crisis in Europe and some of the countries, the peaks and all of that. But the softening of the consumer probably started about 6 months ago. And ultimately, in the value chain, no matter where you are in the electronics value chain, you want the consumer to make purchases. And I think maybe it's part of the economic cycle. There are a lot of challenges, and it also depends on the manufacturer's focus, whether it's international or domestic. So China's domestic consumer is still reasonably robust compared to USA and Europe. And so if the company is focused in China, there is still a lot of opportunities for companies, yes.
Oh, very good, very good.
Yes.
So how about do you think the sales performance in China PCB market? Is it growth any years, or were they affected by the disasters or what, and the economic downturn?
Yes, PCB, it's really dependent on the final products.
Oh,
okay.
Maybe iPhone, is it right?
iPhone, of course. Of course, there are some ecosystems out there that are still in growth mode, especially the iPhone and the whole ecosystem that surrounds that. There are challenges, and it's actually just, I think the big challenge for a lot of PCB manufacturers is actually to get into such an ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
And to really and part of that really depends on how fast they can become world-class manufacturers. But for PCB, they're heavily dependent on the assemblers that make the products that the PCBs go into, right? And so PCBs can develop their own brand name so they can attract the major buyers, global buyers that will bring them into an ecosystem. Okay. When I talk to the major buyers, for example, the Apple HTCs, the Toshibas, they are looking for manufacturers who have that global leadership sense. Maybe they don't have that leadership right now, but they have that vision to become a global leader in whatever products they supply, whether they're final products or actually intermediate products. One criticism when I talk to the major product buyers, so Apple and other major companies, is that some Chinese manufacturers will focus on getting the IPO and just getting the money and then putting it into property or putting it into diversified industries, rather than focusing on becoming the best at what gets them that IPO in the first place. Okay, so it's, if you ask what recommendations I would have for Chinese manufacturers in general, it would come down to their vision about becoming a world-class leader in a particular technology, particular product that they're supplying in the value chain. Yes.
So the China 12 5-year plan is the advocates more about the energy saving and the environmental protection.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that the PCB market will be the products will towards this direction?
I think that's a very good question. We're talking about the government definitely very aware about the pollution associated with different stages of the value chain, and the PCB manufacturing is in one of those areas. So they're aware of that. So therefore it's very difficult to just set up a PCB factory anywhere in China, number one. Number two, there's a focus more on how they manage the pollutants associated with the manufacturing. And so some of the pressure is coming from government restrictions on how much pollution you can have, and that therefore restricts the size of the factory you can have. And some PCB manufacturers are setting up in Southeast Asia, like in Indonesia and Vietnam, to help manage their expansion, and not just expanding in China on their own. To manage that, not just to avoid that, but just to manage within the constraints that the China government have set up. I think the other interesting pressure on manufacturers in general, electronic manufacturers in general, not just PCB, is the type of customer that they have. So if it's the European customers place much more pressure on the Chinese manufacturers in getting their environmental standards into place. The documentation, the procedures, and the control over pollutants. We all know that the RoHS standard is general in the industry, but we're talking about pressures on doing more than just the RoHS, the restriction on hazardous substances. We all know about that. But we're looking at, and so the pressures from the customers are more coming from European customers rather than US customers. Of course, US customers are putting more pressure on the social aspects of the manufacturing environment. That is the labour conditions, child labour and things like that. That becomes a more sensitive issue for US customers. European customers focus more on the environment. So when you talk about the environment, there are a lot of different pressures that these factories are under, and not just the government pressures in China, but also depending on who their ultimate customer is, and that put pressure on the value chain itself. Yes.
I see.
Yes.
So maybe that's the end of our interview. Thanks very much.
Vicky, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks.
Thank you. It's good.